All right, hello, this is Melissa, the insurance exam queen, and we're going to talk about trees as they show up on the property and casualty exam. So the test takers, the test makers, I like to make the joke that the test makers live underground. They don't see they don't know how to talk to people. They're like buried. They're like 10 layers underground. They never see the sun. And so they like to talk about trees a lot because they don't know what trees are, but that they write crazy questions because they don't know how to talk to people. So when you take the state exam, you're going to see like questions that are worded kind of weirdly. And you'll see a lot of questions about trees. So the test makers like tree questions. All right, now there's two different things that we need to remember about trees. There is tree value, and what this means is like the replacing of the trees. So this is about replacement. If your tree is, struck by lightning, wind, hail, whatever is a covered peril, if a covered peril were to happen to the tree and the tree is destroyed, your homeowner's policy comes with a tree value of $500 per tree on most policies, but we're gonna talk about that explicitly. So we need to know what is the value of the tree, because you do have tree coverage. Trees cost money, so you can get your tree, replaced if it were to be destroyed in a covered peril. Then you also have tree removal, which is the cost. This is going to give you the cost to clean up, basically, the cost to remove the tree. So if you have a covered peril like fire or wind and it destroys the tree, you get money to remove the tree and you get money for the tree. So you get money to remove it and you get money to replace it. Okay. So with the tree value, it's important to know on all the policies, what is the value of the tree. So we're going to start with a DP1, which is going to actually fall outside of the tree chart. So a DP1 is known as basic. So that's a dwelling policy 1, DP1, basic policy, which barely covers anything. It's very simple, very basic policy. And it comes with $0 for trees. So with a DP1 basic, you get $0 for a tree. So it falls outside the tree chart. Then you have an HO8. An HO8. An HO8 is going to cover trees at $250. So an HO8 covers trees at $250. So if you need to replace the value of the tree, you do it for $250. Then every other policy, every single other one is $500 for a tree. So you can either do this two ways. You can either say all others. If you remember all other policies, you could do all others is 500. Or you can write it out. You can say, if you kind of go in order, it would be DP2, DP3, HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6. It's all going to be $500. All other policies are $500 per tree. So DP1, $0 per tree, HO8, $250 per tree, all others, $500. And if you wanted to type them out, then you can either type them out or you can just say all others, whatever makes sense to you. Now, this $500 is per tree, $500 per tree. But what if you have a million trees? Do you get $500 times a million? No, there has to be a limit to how much coverage you're going to get for your trees. So the limit is going to be for all trees, you get, remember with coverage A is coverage for the house itself, the walls and the roof. and it's known as the main coverage on like all the policies. So coverage A is your main coverage. Every other coverage generally becomes a percentage of coverage A, and tree coverage is no different. So with the tree coverage, you get 5% of coverage A. So you get 500 per tree up to 5% of coverage A. So if we have a, for example, over here, so an example, if coverage A is $100,000, 5% of that would be $5,000. They won't ask you to do this generally. Well, maybe, but to find 5% of something, you can, 10% is easy. So just focus on that. 10%, in order to find 10% of something, you just move the decimal over 1. So if you have so your decimal is here, you just move this over 1 time, and then you have 10,000, and then you need only 5%. So you're basically just going to divide that by 2, and that will equal 5,000. So that's probably the easiest way, because not every exam has math or calculator. So in order to do this math, by just doing the 10%, you move the decimal over 1 time, then you have your number, divide it by 2, because it's 5%, not 10%. You need to take half of that to get 5%, and you would get 5,000. So if your coverage A is 100,000, then you would get 5,000 for your trees. But if your coverage A is, 200,000, you're going to have more for trees. So the bigger your coverage A is, the more tree coverage that you're going to have. Now that works for policies that have coverage A, but what about policies like a renter's insurance or a condo policy that doesn't have coverage A? For those policies, it's going to be on a HO4 and a 6, it's going to be 10% of coverage C. Okay, so an HO4 and an HO6, an HO4 has no A, because remember, an HO4 is for rent. It's a renter's insurance policy, meaning it starts with contents only. It only covers your stuff, your clothes, your shoes, your furniture, your pots, your pans. There's no walls, there's no roof, there's no shed, there's no gazebo, because a renter doesn't own the building that they're in, and coverage A and B are for the buildings themselves. So in a renter's, you don't have coverage A. A condo policy is mostly for upgrades, and with coverage A, you may only have 1,000, because if you don't have any upgrades, you won't have a lot of coverage A, which is fine. But that just means that you taking 5% of 1,000 is like nothing. So they set it at coverage C. So all other policies will be 5% of coverage A, but an HO4 and an HO6 will be 10% of C. Okay. So again, this is about tree value replacement. You get, again, on a DP1, it's $0, no tree coverage on a DP1. An HO8 will give you $200 per tree, $250 per tree. So remember, that's per tree. And then all other policies, a DP2, DP3, HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6, all other policies are $500 per tree. And then for all the trees together, so you get 500 per tree, but again, can you have 1,000,000 trees at 500 each? No. So they limit it to 5% of coverage A on all regular policies, and on an HO4 and an HO6, they do 10% of C, and that is for replacement. Then we have tree removal. How much money do they give us to remove trees? And it's actually a very easy. It's $500 per tree, $1,000 max. Basically saying that you are allowed to move 2 trees at 500 each. Now you can remove 3 trees if they're all less than 500, right? Like it's just whatever the situation is. So you get 500 per tree for removal up to $1,000 max. So you will only ever get $1,000 to remove trees. You will only ever get $1,000 to remove trees. And each tree can only get 500. So let me make up an example question here of how you might see this on the exam. And this, by the way, perfect little tree chart. Take a picture of this. I'll also be taking a picture of it. When I send out the recordings, I'll send out the notes. If you're watching the recording, click the note below. Okay, so we'll do a quick little math problem here so you guys can see, what kind of questions they might present on the exam. And if you have seen any, feel free to share that with us and let us know. Okay, so let's say they'll say something like, Bob's trees were struck by lightning. Okay, so Bob's trees had a peril, whatever that is. I don't want to write out a whole sentence for that. So Bob's trees had a peril. Okay, so let's say tree number 1 was $700 to remove, and it was $200 to replace. And then they'll say tree 2 was $300 to remove, and it was $500 to replace. And then they'll say tree 3 was $600 to remove and $1,000 to replace. Okay, now this is going to be like written out as a word problem. Okay, they're going to say Bob's trees were struck by lightning. One of the trees, it cost $700 to remove tree number 1 and $200 to replace it. The second tree was $300 to remove and $500 to replace it. Now they may not go by tree 1 by tree by 2, but they may say 3 trees were removed at this price, 5 trees were replaced at this price, and then you got to sort it out. But as long as you can remember these, that you get 500 per tree. Oh, and they'll have to tell you what type of policy. They'll probably say like an HO3. They love HO3s, by the way, so they like to ask about those. So they're going to tell you it's a regular policy. They don't ask a lot of math questions when it comes to like an HO8, which is 250, but it just comes to memorizing that it's 250 for an HO8, because they could just straight up ask you that. How much is it to replace a tree on an HO8? Okay, so generally they're going to do 500. So then this problem comes down to remembering how much you get per tree for both replacing and removal. So you could take this one step at a time. So tree number 1, 700 to remove, but I only get 500. So I'm going to get 500 here. $200 to replace. That's fine. I get up to 500. So I'll take 200. Tree number 2 is 300 to remove. That's fine. It's less than the 500 per tree. And then I have 1,000 max. I'm still good. So I'm going to get 300 to remove it. Then it's 500 to replace it. That's fine. That's in the per tree limit. So I'll get 500 to replace that one. And then number 3, it's 600 to remove. Now at this point for tree removal, I have spent 300 and I have spent 500. I get a total of 1,000. So after you subtract 500 and you subtract 300, I only have 200 left, because 5 plus 3 is 800. 1,000 minus 800 would be 200. So this one is only going to get 200 to remove it, because that's all that's left. I only get $1,000 max to remove trees. So even though this one is 600 to remove, I only have 200 left available. And then this one is 1,000 to replace, but again, you can only do 500 as the max. And then they might put coverage A in here, but we're only looking at 5 or 2, 5 and 5, like 1,200 to replace. So we're not going to come close to the 5% or the 10%. They generally will not put trying to figure out the percentage of A in addition to also figuring out the value of trees. They'll kind of keep those problems separate. So you're likely to see a question just similar to this, but all, wordy out. So then the answer would be, so the first tree, even though it's 700 to remove, you can only get 500 per tree. So you're going to get 500 to remove that one. Then replacement, you get up to 500. Since it's only 200, you'll get 200. Tree number 2, to remove it, is 300. That's well below the 500, so you got the 300. It's 500 to replace. That's fine. You get up to 500 per tree. Tree number 3 is 600 to remove, but we only have 200 left. And then it's $1,000 to replace, but we only get 500 per tree, so we're going to get 500. And then we add those up. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 16, 17, 20, 2200, I think. I'm not the best at math. If you do get a calculator, you should definitely add it up. Definitely double check if they allow you a calculator. So I'm going to just double check 500. So 500 to remove plus 200 to replace equal plus 300 to remove plus 500 to replace equal plus 200 to remove plus 500 to replace is, yeah, 2,200. I got it. Yeah. So that's and then the question will say, how much did the insurance pay in total? And that's what this word problem will come in. So they're going to ask you a combination of, you had this many trees you needed to remove, and you have to remember 500 per tree for removal for a total of 1,000. So remember, see, we capped out here. This tree to remove was 600, but because we already spent 500 up here, we already spent 300 up here, we spent 800 already of our 1,000. So we only had 200 left. And that's what they're testing you on, is making sure that you don't give more away than what you should. Like if you just added all these numbers up, 700 plus 200 plus 300 plus 5 plus 6 plus 1,000, you're going to get a totally wrong number. But you better believe this will be an answer choice, right? Like this will be number, if you were to add all these ones up, and that would be the answer choice for A, but the answer choice is actually, D at 2,200. So you have to make sure it's 500 per tree for removal, up to 1,000 max. You cannot spend more than $1,000 to remove. You cannot spend more than $1,000 to remove. Then you have the value of the tree. So again, HOA DP1, $0, HOA $250, all others 500, up to 5% of coverage A, and on a 4 and a 6, it's 10% of C, and that is for replacement. So be prepared for questions where they talk about removal of the tree and they talk about tree replacement. And another thing that's important is I just highly stressed that you get, for removal, we said you get 500 per tree, but $1,000 max. They might give you a problem. Well, they'll say tree 1, to remove tree 1, it was $700. To remove tree 2, it was $200. Now you may say, well, I have 1,000 max and 7 plus 2 is only 900. So I'm going to be okay. You have to remember that this 700, the max you can get is 500 per tree. So make sure that you go by tree and then look at the total as well. So each tree can only get up to 500. So if you have a $700 tree, you'll get 500 for that one. $200 tree, you get 200 for that one. Your answer is actually going to be 700 for removal. So you have 2 trees. Again, let me show you. They said tree 1 is $700 to remove. Tree 2 is $200 to remove. You get $1,000 max. You may look at this and think, oh, well, 7 plus 2 is 9, which is below the max, so I'm good. You cannot spend 700 on removal. You only get 500. So it's going to be 500 plus 200 for a total of 700 would be your final answer. Okay. So you have to look at per tree and the total at the same time. Okay. All right. Any questions on our tree remover chart, or the math or anything like that? Okay.